Daniel here for Tabletop for One. Please join me at the table as I teach and play through the Plum Island Horror. And I thank you for joining me for this tutorial and solo playthrough of the Plum Island Horror. The Plum Island Horror is designed by Hermann Luttmann and published by GMT Games, and I backed this game on the P500 system. Received it at the end of December, and I'm totally excited to show it to you because this has become one of my favorite games of all time. This is one of the best games I've ever played. Sorry, I'm going to spoil the review, but yeah, this game is so good, so well designed, so much fun. Sorry I'm hyping it up early on. I don't mean to hype up games, but I want to share the enjoyment of the hobby with you, and this game gives me so much enjoyment. I just love everything about it. Well, almost everything, but I'll explain that in the review later. Let's talk about what this game's all about. It's all about the Plum Island. There was some research done in the Plum Island, and it released a virus that turned people into zombies. They're called murders of horrors is what they're called, and mutations and stuff like that. And so they're attacking the people in the towns, and you play as factions trying to rescue people and survive this oncoming apocalypse. Now, before we go into setup, I just wanted to let you know that this is going to be a two-part video because the video is going to be too long otherwise. So I'm going to do this first video, which involves me showing you the setup, telling you the rules, the vast majority of them, and then maybe I'll do one round of play, and then I'll cut off the video there, and we'll resume a second video where I will finish out that gameplay. And so let's go into setup here. Now, first you need your game board, and then you're going to choose two factions. In the solo mode, you're going to play at least two factions. You can play more if you'd like, but I recommend only doing two just because of the information overload. So I picked out these two factions here, which is the Islanders Athletic Club and the Greenport Township. Then you'll grab all the standees for them. So you have 5 characters, and then you're going to have a compound for each of them. Then you have the turn order markers here. And each faction will get 2 supplies. So you have the supply markers on the 2 side. You'll place them in the supply area here. Now I'm going to have these boards off the screen, so you're not going to see much of what's on them, except you'll see what's in my supplies, and any of the civilians that I've rescued into my compounds will be placed in the slot called Other on the faction board. Now all of the units are going to be placed in their starting spot, and their starting spot is listed at the bottom of their description on the faction board here. So in this case here, Coach Sid Calhoun is going to be placed at 4K. Now, the game gives you the name of the place, so that's the VFW Memorial Park, but I'm going to be referencing the letter code. So 4K is the 4th lane, and this goes A, B, C, D all the way down. So 4K is down here, and it's shown on the board. Now, I have my board sideways just so I can fit on the screen here, but you'll see the letter codes in the bottom left-hand corner or upper left-hand corner if you have the board turned the other way. All right, so once we place out all our faction characters, we're going to place the NPC units and vehicles on the board. So we'll have the shore patrolman here, and he gets the Alyssa with him at that location. And then we have the Coast Guard helicopter, which is going to go here at 2I. And then we have the Cheyenne Sky, which is a cruise ship. That's going to go here at 3K. And then the AirMed goes at 2G at the hospital. The rest of the NPC faction units are going to be placed on this card here, and this will be set off to the side. They may come in later due to card effects. Next, we're going to be placing out the civilian tokens. The civilian tokens have this white background showing a little family there, and we're going to be placing them out on the board. Now, you're going to look at all the spaces, and you're going to look, most of them are going to be building spaces. There's one here that is the Memorial Park, which will take a civilian unit, but you look at the icon in the upper corner, and see if there's any white dots there. So like in this location here, 4E, there's 2 white dots above the building icon. That indicates that you're going to put 2 civilian units there. Anytime that I'm referring to a civilian unit, it is the token itself, not the value on the token. So 1 unit is 1 token regardless of the value. And so I'll populate the board here. And after you've populated the board with the civilian units, you'll have 8 tokens left over. You'll keep these off to the side because they may come into play later. Next, you'll take the 4 turn order tokens for your factions, as well as the 3 red fate tokens and the 1 black doom token. You'll add this to the brown canvas bag, which we'll use to draw tokens for the rounds. Then you're going to take 5 green cubes, and you're going to put it in the Biohazard bag. That'll start off the Biohazard bag. The remaining cubes, the yellows, the reds, and the black ones, will be placed on this board. Now note that there are 14 cubes here that you're going to place here, but you actually have extras, or you might have extras in your box. So keep that in mind. Count out 14 for the yellow and for the red, and then 50 for the black. And then those extras you can just put in the small bag back in the box. You'll not use them unless you lose a cube for some reason. And then you'll shuffle each of the decks. We have the event deck, the fate deck, and the search deck, and you'll have these off to the side. Then we're going to spawn our first stacks of zombies. They're called Murders of Horrors. You'll see it says at the top here, Murder of Horrors. I'll refer to them as stacks usually. And so we'll spawn our first stacks. Now it's going to be 4 in each stack and 1 stack in each of these spawn points. These are spawn points at the top of the map. So you put a stack of 4 in each of those spots. And then you'll take the Mutation faction mat, as well as the 6 different units, and you'll place this off to the side. Those mutation units get summoned later through events. Then you'll take the trackers here, and you're going to place them at the first spot of each of their tracks. So we have overrun points, the biohazard track, the game round track in the first round there, and then the evacuation points in the 0 spot. And now we have to simulate that some damage has been done by the evacuation and other reasons, involving this apocalypse. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the island light and power, which is 3H, it's out of power. So we put this token here as well as 3 total damage for that location. And then you'll need 6 tokens on the 2 damage side to be placed. One gets placed at the hospital on 2G. One gets placed on the Great South Bay Bridge, which is up here. One gets placed over here at 2C at the industrial park. Then at the Greenport docks and the Coast Guard docks, they each get 1. And then the Old Republic Airport, which is 6E, gets 1 of those damage tokens. And then we needed to simulate damage done to other bridges. So the chart for this is found on the back of the rulebook. So if you ever need to reference that, it's right there. What you're going to do is you're going to draw a fate card. And what we're looking for is a fate number. Now, we haven't talked about fate cards yet, but the fate number is the number shown in this little yellow symbol here at the bottom right. So you consult it based on that number. So we've drawn a 1 and it's widespread damage. So place a 2 damage marker on each odd number bridge and the Great South Bay Bridge area. Now you're going to find the bridges located all throughout here. Most of them are on this side here. You'll see that there's this canal or river going through the city here. There's bridges right here, and that's the general icon for bridges. Now they'll show a number next to the bridge. So this is number 3. These are 1 and 2 here. We have 4, 5, and 6 here, then 7 here, then 8, which is here, and then 9 down at the bottom. So we're going to have to put 1 each on the odd number bridges. So 1, 3, 5, 7, and then 9 down here, and then 1 on the Great South Bay Bridge. So that actually has 4 damage on it now. All right, so there's one more part to set up, and we are going to activate the zombie tracks until they come in contact with a civilian or with a player unit. And so you're going to draw a fate card. And so I've drawn this card here, and you're just going to look in the activate section, and you're going to activate track 1. I'll explain the stack movement and combat, but just to help you with your setup here. So track number 1 is going to activate, and this is a stack of 4. And so it's only going to move 2 spaces, 1, then 2. It comes in contact with the civilian. It kills the civilian, and then it's going to gain a tile to it for killing that civilian. And then on top of that, we're going to add a yellow cube to the biohazard bag. And again, that'll make more sense as I explain how all that works here shortly. All right, and so that's it for setup. Now, before I go into the rules overview, I want to give you the keys to success in this game as far as knowing where to find rules when you have a question on how to do something. So first of all, we have the player aid card, which tells you all the different actions and follow actions that you can take on your turns or using the follow actions. And so I'll explain all these actions in detail, but if you're ever wondering what actions you can do, just reference this card. And if you need any additional information on those actions, then you can look them up in the rulebook. But most of this is covered on this card, so it's very useful. Next, when dealing with damage, as far as the stacks doing damage, you're going to look at these 2 different locations here, or you can just look at this one on the main board here. But basically it tells you by how many tiles a stack has, and what location it's in, whether it's clear, forest, or building. That's going to tell you how much damage it's going to do. Now for the actual math behind it, you can look at this here, the horror hits potential, and it tells you that in a clear area, a tile counts for half damage, forest area, third damage, and a building area, a quarter damage. Now all those damages are rounded up, but that's where that information is found. Now just as a reference, a clear area is any area that does not have an icon, and it's this color here, so it just shows a dash in that corner. A building shows a building in the corner, and then a forest shows a forest in the corner. Next up, if you have any questions about the stack movement allowances, it tells you right here on this board that if it's 1 to 3 tiles, it moves 3 areas. If it's 4 to 6, it moves 2. If it's 7 or more, it moves 1, and it gets +1 during night game rounds. Then we have the quick reference guide, which is this placard here. It shows the sequence of play. It shows the repair table if you use the repair action. It shows the overrun points if an overrun happens. And then it shows the different resolutions for close combat versus range combat. Also on the back of that placard, you have the VIP civilians, which if those come into play, you can reference these on what they do and how they work. And so that's going to give you the vast majority of information on things that you're questioning when you play, especially when it comes to movement and combat and that sort of thing. All right, so first we're going to talk about how you win or lose the game. You're going to win the game by making it to the end of the 9th round and having 26 points or more from evacuations. Now the way you lose, there's multiple ways you can lose in this game. One of the ways to lose is to lose all your faction units of one faction on the board. The moment that that happens, the game is over because the other faction is disheartened and basically runs away. Another way to lose is if the Biohazard track makes it all the way to 17. The moment that happens, the game is over. And then if the overrun track makes it all the way to 8, then the game is over. And so the last way you lose the game is if you make it to round 9 and you don't have 26 points or more, then you lose the game. All right, so let's talk about the sequence of play. So first we start off with the hunger phase. And the hunger phase only happens in the night round. But if it's the beginning of any of the night rounds, you'll do the hunger phase. And that's where you have to spend 1 supply per faction unit you have to feed them. And then 1 supply if you have any civilian units in your compound. And that's 1 supply for all the civilians in your compound, not 1 each. Any faction unit that's not fed will take 1 hit of damage. And if the civilians are not fed, then 1 of those will be killed. And so next is the activity phase, and this is where the vast majority of the game is going to be played. It starts off with drawing a turn order token, and then resolving that turn, and then drawing another one until you run out of tokens in the bag. Now there are 3 types of tokens, and the first one is the fate token. So if you draw a fate token, then you're going to draw a fate card from the deck. And what you're going to look at is you're going to look at the top part first, and that says spawn on track 3. So what you're going to do is you're going to spawn based on your biohazard level. See on the biohazard track here, wherever the tracker is, it'll tell you how many tiles get spawned. So on the top track, you'll spawn 3 tiles, where on the bottom track, you'll spawn 4. So keeping an eye on that biohazard track will help you as far as how many tiles get spawned. Now when tiles get spawned, they'll be placed in the spawning area, and if there are already tiles there, you'll just add those to that stack. And so that stack will just get larger. Then you look at the activation, and so that it says to activate tracks 4 and 5. Now the activation could say Surge, which Surge means that you draw a fate number. Again, you'll draw another fate card. Look at the number on the bottom right and use that number. And for Surge, you're going to activate that track number from the fate number there, and you'll activate it 2 times. And so when you activate tracks, so let's say we're activating tracks 4 and 5 here, you'll activate them 1 at a time. You'll start with the stacks or mutations that are furthest down on the track, and move them 1 at a time until you get all the way to the ones at the top of the track. But in this case here, we only have the ones at the top of the track. Now, if you activate a stack or a mutation that's in a space already with a civilian unit or NPC or faction unit, then it'll initiate combat instead of moving. But in this case here, with activating tracks 4 and 5, they're in the spawn zone, and there can never be any units in the spawn zone, any faction units or otherwise. Now before I activate these tracks, I want to talk about some basic movement rules for the mutations and the horror stacks. And so one thing to note is they always move along the white arrows unless an event card or something otherwise tells them to cross over on green arrows. only you can cross over on green arrows, but they're always going to go move down following the white arrows with the possibility of moving onto the South Bay Bridge. Now, anytime they're moving off of a space that has a branching path, you're going to draw a fate number. Again, the fate number is in the bottom right-hand corner. So you just reference that number of a drawn fate card, and then that'll tell you which path it's going to go to. And so this one says 1 or 6, and this one says numbers 2 through 5. So if we had drawn this fate 4 here, then they would choose that path there. Now note, in this spot here, it also has a branching path from this space, which could result them going into the South Bay Bridge or heading further down this way. And so it'll move its full movement unless it comes in contact with a unit, then it'll end its space in combat with that unit. Now, anytime that a horror stack is trying to move through a damaged bridge, it's actually going to end up damaging itself and removing these tokens one at a time. So in this case here, there's 2 damage here, and if it's trying to move through here, it'll flip that over and lose 1 tile, and then remove this and lose another tile like so. And that applies for the Great South Bay Bridge as well. Now we're going to talk about overrun. So we are in the situation where track 5 is being activated. This stack would move into this space here. It would initiate combat with the civilian, killing the civilian. And then we would look and see, is there any other units in the location here, this final location at the end of the track? No, there is not. There's only this stack. And what that would do is that would cause an overrun. Now again, you're going to refer to the overrun points table to figure out how many points of overrun it's going to do. In that case there, with 5i, it's just 2 points in that area. And so what happens there is you remove these tiles. These get removed from the game, and so you'll not be able to use them to build new stacks later on, which shortens the supply, which can cause more overrun points. I'll explain shortly. But you'll remove this from the game. You'll add a overrun token here, and that location becomes forever compromised, which can have effects on other actions, which I'll explain later. Now, if a spot gets overrun again by another stack, let's say, then you'll remove that stack, you'll do the points of overrun according to that chart, as well as 1 additional point for being overrun again. And then another way that overrun points can happen is when you need to spawn a Murder of Horrors stack, and you don't have enough tiles to make a full stack according to the spawn value, then that'll cause 1 overrun point for each instance that you can't make a full stack. It's not for each tile that you're missing. All right, so those are the general rules for movement of the horror stacks. So let's say we were activating again off this card here that says to activate 4 and 5. We'll move these along. So this one's going to move first, goes 1 and 2. Again, a stack of 4 moves 2. And it's going to end its space inside a same space with a civilian unit. That's going to cause a combat, which I'll explain shortly. But we are also going to activate the other ones here. And it's this stack here. It moves 1 and 2 like this. Now there's nothing there, so nothing's going to happen. Now anytime a stack ends its movement in a space with a unit, it's going to go into combat. Now when it comes to combat with civilians, each civilian token only takes 1 hit. VIP civilians might actually have more hit points, but we'll cover that if I ever see any VIP civilians during the playthrough. But each regular civilian takes 1 hit. Now, according to the chart, a zombie stack only ever needs 1 tile to do 1 damage. So it would immediately fight this civilian, and civilians don't fight back. They automatically die. Now, anytime a civilian unit dies, or any other unit dies, the zombie stack gets 1 additional tile added to it, as well as you add a biohazard cube to the back. But at first you'll start off with the yellow cubes, and then after you run out of yellow cubes, you'll start adding red cubes. Now, if at any point the zombie stack ends its movement in combat in the same space with a player unit, it's going to attack the player unit instead of the civilians, and we'll go over player unit combat a little bit later. All right, so that's it for the Fate token, but before we go on, I want to note one thing here. When you're drawing cards for the Fate token, you're only doing the spawn and activate. You ignore this at the bottom, all right? You don't draw an event card. That is used for something else, and that'll be explained later when we talk about player activations. So again, the Fate token only does the spawn and the activate. Now the next type of token is this Doom token. It's the black token. There's only 1 of them in the bag. And it causes you to draw an event card. And event cards are not good. They are all bad. Now the event cards will have you do all sorts of things. Like this one here called What Kind of Hell Is This? It has you drawing a fate number, spawning the Leper Messiah's mutation standee, and it goes in that track number's spawn zone. So whatever the fate number is, you'll place it in that spot. Now sometimes mutations will take extra damage if certain civilians on the board, like this one says, if the Uhtred Viking Cruises civilians unit is on the map or evacuated, then it'll do 1 damage to that mutation, and you'll track that with the black cubes. Now, the best way to find out whether or not that unit is on the board or evacuated is you're actually going to look at the 8 tokens that didn't get put out on the board and check those names. So we check here to see if it's in one of these tokens here, and it's not. It's not one of those names. And you also check any that were killed in combat, like the one earlier was killed. And so none of those are there. None of those are the Uhtred Viking Cruises civilians. So that means it's somewhere on the field, or I may have evacuated it. And so at that point, you would do the 1 damage to the Leper Messiahs. Now the mutations have their own stats, their own combat damage, as well as their own movement. And all of that is listed here. Now their movement is listed by the white circle. It shows the foot movement. So these ones move 2 spaces, this one moves 1, this one moves 3, but it has an asterisk, and this one has 3 as well. And so I'm not going to go over all of these in detail. You'll find out their movement and how that works whenever you encounter them. Now they also have their own set of hit points here, and you'll track those with the black cubes as they take damage. And then their combat value is in the yellow, and that is always going to happen. They don't roll dice or anything, so whenever they do combat, that's how much damage they're going to do. All right, so the last kind of token is the faction token. And so before we go into the faction token, we're going to talk about faction anatomy. And you're going to find this chart on the NPC faction unit. It's going to tell you all the icons and what it means on this picture here. So you have the character name and title. Titles may come into play with other abilities. In the yellow triangle, you're going to have the melee combat value, and that's how many dice you're going to roll in a close combat. Next to that, you might have a ranged attack, which shows a little target and a number underneath, and that'll be how many dice you roll in a ranged attack. Next is the admin values, this green number here, which is the value you're going to use generally when you're using the crowd control action. The next one here is the bravery stat, and the bravery stat is used in a variety of different things, but that value is shown here in the red. Then you have the foot movement, and that's how much it can move by foot. You have the vehicular movement, and that's how much it can move by vehicle, how many spaces. And then you have the heart value, which tells you how many hits it can take before it dies. And then above the heart, you might have a special ability based on that particular unit. In this case here, this red cross means that it can use a healing ability to heal other units or itself. And so I'm not going to go over all the factions, all their units, and all their abilities in detail. In the playthrough, I will explain them as I use them. But if you ever need to reference them, just look at your faction sheets. All right, so when you draw a faction token, the first thing you can do with that faction is what is called a Crisis Adrenaline move. When you do a Crisis Adrenaline move, you can move all those faction units. So in this case here, it's the orange faction that's being activated. You can move them all by their foot stat. So let's say I decided to move Miguel here up 1 space into this space here. And then maybe I move this guy over here. I think it's Johnny Deere or something like that. I forget his name, but yeah. And then after you've done the Crisis Adrenaline move, you're going to reference the current round and look in the red number here. That number is going to tell you how many actions you have per activation. So in this case here, we only get 1 action for that activation, whereas later on, most of the rounds are going to have 3 actions per activation. And so with 1 action, you get to choose 1 of your units, and only 1, to do 1 action. And so first we have the move action. Now, once again, they generally have a foot stat, and so you get to move that many spaces. Now, you are able to cross over these green spots, and you can move against the grain on the white arrows here. So don't worry about those white arrows. They're just telling you the way the monster moves, but you can move against those. But you can't cross areas that don't have a connection. So like right here, there's no connection here, or down here, there's no connection here. So you can't cross over those. Now, if you ever move into a space, let's say I was moving the tennis players here and I get 3 movements. So we go 1, 2, and I wanted to get over here, I couldn't, because the moment you enter into a space with a stack or with a mutation, you have to end your movement there. Now, if you start your movement in a space with a stack, you can move out of there freely, so keep that in mind. Now, some of the units also have a vehicular stat, like this one here, the fireman. He has a vehicular stat of 4, or John Deere over here has a stat of 3. And so you can use a vehicle, but you have to spend 1 supply to do a vehicular movement. That's to signify the use of gasoline. But it does allow you to get across the city more easily. All right, so the next action you can do is combat. When you do combat, there's 2 different kinds. There's close combat and ranged combat. So let's say I had my unit here with this stack here. I can initiate a close combat or a ranged combat if I wanted to, if my ranged combat allowed for it. Now, this particular unit has both close combat and ranged combat, so I could do either of them if I wanted to. Now, when you initiate close combat, or if a stack initiates close combat with you, you're going to end up rolling dice. And so you're going to roll dice based off of your number in that close combat stat, which is the yellow triangle. So this unit here can roll 2 dice. And so you're going to roll the 2 dice. Now they have different faces on them that do different things. So this star here is a critical hit, which automatically does 1 hit of damage, and then you get to re-roll this die and apply whatever it rolls. The shield here will prevent 1 hit of damage done to you. The whole heart will deal 1 damage, or 2 half hearts together will deal 1 damage. 1 half heart by itself doesn't deal any damage. You need 2 half hearts to do 1 damage. And then of course there are blank sides as well that do nothing. Now, damage is determined and done simultaneously. So when determining damage, you're going to first look at the stack on the horrors here, or you're going to look at the mutation and their damage. But the stack here has 5, and you can determine how much damage that is. Again, you can consult the chart, but in a building here, each tile is a quarter of damage, so this would be 1.25 damage, but it's rounded up. And so it's going to end up being 2 damage done to this unit if this was engaged in close combat. Now, let's say this unit was 1 space away. It can engage in ranged combat. If you're 1 space away and connected, as in there's a connection between those 2 adjacent areas, then you can do ranged combat. Now, I do want to note that even if a connection is damaged, it's still valid for ranged combat between those 2 connections. So in this case here, I could roll and do damage against this unit. Now, it's the same as melee combat or close combat, except for one thing. If you roll a shield, which in ranged combat, you can't get attacked back, and so if you roll a shield, it actually does 1 damage. Now, I didn't mention, anytime you engage in ranged combat, you have to spend 1 supply. It's like spending ammo, or for the tennis players, I guess they're spending tennis balls, or for the golf player, he's spending golf balls or something like that. So you do have to spend 1 supply to enter into ranged combat, but again, there's more of an advantage to do so. And so once damage is done, you're going to apply that damage. Now, for each hit of damage you do against the stack, you'll remove 1 tile, and this goes back in the pool. Each damage that is done to you, you're going to add cubes to your board and place those on that character. Now, if at any point the cubes match the character's toughness, so this toughness is 4 for this one. So if this one had reached 4 on its hits or more, then that character would go into what is called a last stand. And this applies to all faction units, including the compound, as well as NPC units, but not for civilian units. Civilian units never have a last stand. And so when that happens, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a fate card and check the fate number. And you're going to check that number against their bravery stat. So again, the bravery stat is the red number shown on the character. And if their bravery stat is equal to or higher than the fate number drawn, then they will have survived that attack by 1 hit point. So that means you remove as many cubes down to 1 less than their toughness level. So in this case here, with a toughness level of 4, we'd still have 3 hit cubes remaining on that character, but they would still be alive. Now, the next action we can do is called crowd control. But before I talk about that, we're going to talk about compromised areas. An area is compromised if any of the following apply. Any horror units occupy the area, so that could be mutations or the stacks. And the area contains any number of damage markers. So like this area here at the Light and Power Company is currently compromised due to the damage markers there. Or the area has an overrun marker on it. All right, so let's talk about crowd control. So crowd control lets you basically direct civilians out of danger and into safer areas. And so the way it works is you're going to look at the admin rating of your character. So we have Phil King here. He has an admin rating, the green number, which is a number 2 here. And that means he can move 2 civilian units into an adjacent space. Now, you cannot move them through damaged bridges, so keep that in mind. But he could move them down here this way. And so, again, a civilian unit is a token. Don't worry about the value. The value on here is the point value for evacuating them. So in this case here, you could spend his 1 action to do a crowd control, moving these 2 units into an adjacent area. Now, I do want to note, I'll mention this again later, but anytime that you crowd control from the bridge off the map, then that will cause these units to be rescued or to be evacuated. And I'll talk about that when we get to evacuation. Now, do note that the only way to move civilians out of a compound, if they are in a compound, is through the crowd control action. All right, so let's talk about evacuation, and there's certain ways you can evacuate. You can evacuate by boat or by helicopter, or once again, by crowd controlling off of the South Bay Bridge off the map. But the general way you're going to evacuate is by boat or by helicopter. And so the first thing you need to look is to see if you have civilian units in the same space as a boat or a helicopter. So let's look at this Greenport docks here at 3K. Let's say that there was no damage here and we have civilians and the Cheyenne Sky here. We would be able to evacuate them. If there was damage there, the area would be compromised and you can't do any evacuations while the area is compromised. Now, when you evacuate, you can evacuate as many units as the value shown on the vehicle by which they're evacuating. And so for the Cheyenne Sky here, you can evacuate up to 4 tokens per evacuate action. Now, you do not need a faction unit in that location to do the evacuation. So you can spend your 1 action and do it as long as this setup is met. Now, when it comes to helicopters, they actually have to be at a helipad, and the helipad is signified by the red H here, as shown at the industrial park here has a helipad, but this is currently compromised. But you are able to move a helicopter there when it's not compromised and then do an evacuation. Some of the helicopters include the Coast Guard as well as the Air Med. Now, boats themselves have to be at the docks, so they can move from different docks to other docks, and there's a dock down here. So they can move to those 3 docks. Now, the Texas Navy boat, which may come out and play later, can actually move to beaches as well. And we'll talk about how you move those when it comes to the reposition action, which is a follow action, and I'll talk about that during the follow action step. Now, anytime you evacuate civilians, you're going to record their points on the evacuation points track. Again, the point value is shown on the token itself, and so this one here is worth 2 points. All right, so the next action we're going to talk about is the repair action. The repair action, you have to have a faction unit in that space that has damage in it or is connected by a damaged bridge. So the tennis players down here could try and repair this bridge, or Ed here can try and repair the power plant. And so the way you do a repair action is you're going to draw a fate card, and you're going to compare the fate number to the repair table. And so it's going to tell you, in this case here, that I've drawn a fate number of 1, which is awful. It says epic fail. For a damaged area or bridge, increase the damage marker value by 1. For a disabled unit, this unit is immediately eliminated from the game. That is not good at all. But it does give you a duct tape option. The player may instead spend 1 supply marker to convert this result to no effect. If so, the damaged markers or disabled unit remain as is. But most of these other ones cause repairs, so 2 to 3 will let you reduce the damage marker value by 1, or to flip a disabled unit and spend 1 supplies to do it. 4 or 5 will repair it equal to the admin rating of the unit. And then number 6, it just repairs it completely. So yeah, that's how that works. But again, you're going to draw a fate number to do that. The next action you can do is to build a compound. So you have the compound that's on your faction mat, and you can build it in an area with 1 of your faction units. You have to spend 2 supplies and take 1 hit of damage to do so. And so if I built it here in the Memorial Park, that would do 1 damage to Sid here, and then it would cost me my 2 supplies that I currently have on my supply area. But now I have a compound which can house civilians, and compounds come with their own hit points. In this case here, this one has 5 hit points, and you can see on the back here, it gives you the stats for it. As well as it has damage stats and everything, because it can be involved in combat. Now, when you build a compound, if there are already civilians in that area, you can automatically place them in the compound, and you place them on the other track on your faction mat, so they would go right here. But just note that you're going to have to feed them later. Now, the civilians are protected until this is destroyed, and if it survives at the end of the game, then any civilians in there are considered evacuated, you'll get their evacuation points, but that only happens at the end of the game. Now, if a civilian unit gets crowd controlled from an adjacent area into that area with the compound, they can immediately go into the compound for free. If the compound is ever destroyed, again, they do get a last stand, but if it is ever destroyed, then all the civilian units in that compound are immediately placed in this area, which could result in them being attacked by that zombie stack or the mutation. All right, the next thing you can do is you can use a location action. On the locations, there are 3 types of symbols that are involved in these actions. You have the Forage Action, which involves you finding supplies. You have the Search Action, the binoculars here, which involves you searching for things. And then this other action is the Decontaminate Action, which lets you manipulate the Biohazard track. Now, when you use a Forage Action, let's say we had a player unit here in 4E, and I use the Forage Action, you're going to count up the number of icons for the Forage Action. In this case, there's 2 there. And you'll gain that many supplies, and you'll immediately add those to your supply area. Now, when you use the Forage Action, you're also going to place an exhausted location marker in that location. That means that location cannot be used for location actions until the next round. So at the end of the round, we'll be removing these and making those available again. Now, if you use the Search Action, which is the binoculars, you'll draw a search card, and the search cards do all sorts of things. Most of them are good. Sometimes you'll have some bad ones, but most of them are really good. And so this is the primary way by extra civilians and supplies get put on the board. And so this one here has you place Nick Grimes VIP Civilians Unit in the Good Samaritan Hospital 2G, which would go here. And so this guy will get placed in that unit. And so he actually has a combat value. And again, you'll reference the quick reference guide on the reverse side that shows all the VIP civilians to find out exactly how that works. But you just take that particular token and place it in that area. Now, sometimes it'll have you add supplies to the board, which those supplies can be picked up during a move action for free as you move through those areas that have supplies. Now, one thing to note on the search action is you don't put an exhausted location marker there unless the card tells you to. So keep that in mind. And then the last of those location actions is decontamination action. So if I was here at the PIRL Corporation HQ, that is 4H, and I use the biohazard action here, or the decontamination action, I would then lower the biohazard track by 2 because there's 2 icons here. And then this location would get an exhausted location marker. The next thing you can do is the heal action, and the heal action is found on some units, like the doctor here has the heal action on it. Or if you are in the hospital zone, which is 2G here, and it's not compromised, you can use the emergency room and automatically get healed. Or let's say the helicopter, the air med was over here with Ralph, and we wanted to medevac him back to the hospital. As long as the destination is not compromised, then we could send him to the hospital and he'll get healed along the way. Just note that the helicopter will stay at the location where we send him from. And then the last of the main actions is the faction special action. There's some units, for instance, this fireman here, he has the fire hoses special action. And so if you use the special action, you just follow the instructions on the faction mat. The fire hoses action lets you actually push zombies to adjacent areas and stun them. And just so you know, when you stun a stack, it skips its next activation. But I also want to note that the special actions can never be used on a follow action. And we're going to talk about follow actions right now. See, after you've done all your actions for your activation, so let's say Orange had done its 1 action for its activation here, then the other factions can do what is called a follow action. Now, after you do a follow action, you'll have to draw a fate card and then consult at the bottom whether to draw an event card for using that follow action. So this card here says no event card. So it doesn't cost me anything to use that follow action. Now in the multiplayer mode, each player could take a follow action, but the moment that an event card is drawn, then no more follow actions can be taken. However, in the solo mode, you can take up to 2 follow actions, regardless of whether an event card is drawn after each of those follow actions. So when you choose a follow action, you can activate any one of the other factions' units doing that action. And again, they cannot use any of their special actions that they have on their faction mat, but they can use all normal actions. And on top of that, you can use what is called a reposition action. Reposition action is going to be found on your player aid here, and it reminds you that it's follow action only. And you can choose 1 helicopter or boat that is not disabled and move it any distance to any eligible area. Now, helicopters can go to a helipad and boats to docks, but they cannot be compromised. The location that they leave from can be compromised, but the destination location cannot be. Now, one thing to note is that during the active player's activations, they can also use the NPC as one of their units. It's a shared unit across all activations, and so they use it like a normal unit. It has its own special abilities, own stats and everything, and just follow what their abilities are on the faction map. All right, so once you've done your activation and follow actions, then you're going to draw tokens. Again, you're going to draw all 8 tokens until you're done with the activations phase. And then we're going to go to the end phase. Now, if it's the end of a night, then we're going to remove all of the exhausted location markers, and those will be available for the next day to be used. Then any mutations on the board, again, the mutations are found on this mat here. If they have any damage on them, they're going to heal by one hit cube. And then we're going to go to the Biohazard step, and this is where you draw the Biohazard cubes from the bag. Now, if you draw a green cube, it's not going to do anything, but if you draw a yellow cube, it's going to cause the Biohazard track to move 1 space, and if you draw a red cube, it'll move 2 spaces. Any drawn cubes are going to be put back into the bag. Then we'll take all of the tokens, the turn order tokens, and put them back in the bag, and then you advance the game marker 1 round. Now, if you're starting the next round in the night mode, just remember to do the hunger step where you're going to have to pay supplies for each of your faction units, as well as 1 supply for all civilians that are going to be inside your compounds. All right, so that is the vast majority of the rules. I know there's a lot of rules to learn here, but a lot of it becomes very, secondhand, easy to remember. Again, you have all those reference cards if you ever need to, question the stats on anything, the damage and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, a lot of it's easy to remember. It's fairly smooth gameplay. This is a very long game, so you're looking at probably 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours on a game, maybe even 2.5 hours. It just depends on how fast you do it. But I'm going to go ahead and start with 1 round of gameplay, and I'll pause the video there, and then I will resume in a new video the rest of the gameplay, and if you want to see how it plays out. All right, so I believe I am all reset here and ready to start the game. Now, as a reminder, if it was the nighttime, we would be doing the hunger phase, but that's not till round 3. And so we're going to go straight into drawing a token from the bag. And when we draw our first token, and it's the faction token for the orange faction, which means I'm going to get to activate them. There's only 1 action per activation in the first round, so I only get to do 1. But before that, we have the Crisis Adrenaline phase, which means I get to move all of my orange faction units if I'd like to. And so I think I'll take advantage of that. I'm going to move the tennis players here. I'll move Miguel up here. And I think I'll move Johnny Deere right here. The rest of them I'm going to keep in their spaces. And so now I get to choose an action. So that means one of these units only gets to do 1 action. And so I think I will use my tennis players to do a ranged attack against the stack of horrors here. And so as a reminder with ranged attacks, you look at the ranged attack stat, which is the number below the little target symbol. In this case here, they have a ranged attack of 2. However, that unit in particular has a special ability called Vicious Serve. When this unit issues a ranged combat attack, any critical hit results in 2 hits in addition to the reroll. So we're going to roll here and see what we get. Oh, and check that out. We did get a critical hit and a half of heart. So we're going to reroll this. So we automatically are going to do 2 damage. We're going to reroll this, and it's nothing. Now, I do want to remind you that that actually cost me 1 supplies to use that action. So now I'm down to 1 supply. But I did 2 damage, which means I remove 2 of these tokens from there. And any zombie tokens that you remove go back to their normal supply. All right, so now my actions are done for the faction. Now we have a follow action, which means I can take up to 2 follow actions. Again, after each follow action, I have to draw a fate card to see if I have to draw an event card. But I think I'm going to use the repair action with Ed here. And so when you do a repair action, you're going to draw a fate card. And then you're going to consult the table on the reference sheet here. And it tells you how well you've done. So I drew a 5 number, and that says, for damaged area or bridge, remove damage markers equal to the admin rating of the unit. All right, so his admin rating is 4, so I can remove up to 4, and there's only 3 there, which means this is completely repaired. Now, when you completely repair the light and power, you're going to flip this token over, and it says, you gain 5 supplies when repaired. And so it's actually 5 supplies to each of your factions. So now the purple faction has 7 supplies, and the orange one has 5 supplies. Now, since I did a follow action, I now have to draw a fate card to see if I have to draw an event card. We'll flip this over, and it says no event card. So that's good. That didn't cost me anything. Now next up, I'm going to do another follow action, and this time we're going to use Ralph over here, and we're going to do one of the location actions. And so we can either do the decontaminate, but our biohazard track hasn't moved yet, or we can forage for supplies or search. We're going to do the search card. I like the search cards. They give a lot of really good stuff. We'll flip this over. All right, it says, we need volunteers at the CDC. Check your unit's admin rating. And so our unit's admin rating is 2. And it says, we could use some extra hands, grab a snack. Your unit may take 1 hit, and then each player gets 2 supplies. Oh, that's really good. And so I'm going to take one of these black cubes here and place it on Ralph. Ralph has now taken 1 damage, which is fine. He has a toughness rating of 5, so that's no big deal. But then we get supplies for each of the locations, and so we have a lot of supplies to work with. That's really good. Now I do have to draw a fate card again to see. And once again, we do not have to draw an event card for using that follow action. Now that I've used 2 follow actions, I can't use any more. So now we have to draw a new token for the round. And we draw a fate token, which means we're going to have to draw a fate card and activate and spawn some zombies. So we spawn on track number 4. Again, the spawn value is shown on your biohazard track. If you're in the top row of the biohazard track, it's only 3. If you're in the bottom row, it's 4. So we have a stack of 3 horrors going in track number 4. Since it's being added to a stack that's already there, they just combine together. They amalgamate, or however it is. And so now there's a stack of 7 there. And then we activate track 3. Now, track 3 has a stack of 4. And if you consult the movement chart, that means it can move 2 areas. Since it's not night, if it was night, it would move 1 additional area. So we're going 1 and 2 like so, and it ends its movement there. There's no combat happening here, so it just stays right there. Now that that fate's done, we draw another token, and this time it's the purple faction. So the purple faction gets a go. Let's see if we want to do some crisis adrenaline moves. And I think I will. I think I'm going to move the fireman into this location here. He has a movement of 2, so he can move over there. And since Ed is done over here, I think I'm going to move him. So we'll go 1 and 2 like this. The rest of them, I'm going to leave where they're at for now. And so that means I get 1 action to do with the purple units. And I think I'm going to use the fireman to do a repair action. So we'll draw a fate card, and it's a number 6. I don't even have to look at the chart. That means I fully repaired that area, so this one's repaired now. Which also means I can bring a helicopter in to start rescuing these civilians. So that's something I might do. Alright, so now that that action is done, I have no more actions for the purple faction. I can do a follow action. And so I think that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to move the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is going to come in over here into this place. That's called the Reposition action. And the helicopter can only go here if it's not compromised. And so it's not compromised. So that is really good. That puts me in a good position to be able to evacuate these civilians. But that does mean I have to draw a fate card to see if I need to draw an event card. Still no event card. So that's all right. Now, unfortunately, do you see that fate number? That was a really good draw, which means I'm not going to draw that for a while. Now, I do want to mention, anytime you run out of cards in a deck, you'll reshuffle the deck or the discard into a new deck. All right, so do I want to do another follow action? I think I will, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a compound. I'm going to build it in this area here. Now, that's going to take 2 supplies. So we remove 2 supplies, and then also Sid is going to take 1 damage for doing the compound action. And so he is now down to 3 hit points. Now, I never talked about the leadership abilities as found on 2 of your units, or 1 in each faction. And so Sid right here has a leadership ability, and so does the mayor, as shown by their flags. And they are passive abilities that help. So for instance, for Sid, any units in that location or in adjacent locations can reroll 1 die during combat. Or for the mayor, he boosts the admin stat and the bravery stat of anybody in the same location or adjacent locations, and that's boosted by 1 to a maximum of 5. Now, as part of that action, I'm going to go ahead and put the civilians into that compound, and so they're going to remain there for now. And as part of that action, because it was a follow action, I have to draw a fate card to see if I draw an event card, and sure enough, I do not draw one again. That is really good. Starting off the game just right. So I've done 2 follow actions. That round is over. We're on to the next turn, and so we draw a new token, and it is a fate card. So we're going to draw a fate card, spawn some zombies, and activate them. Oh, wow, this is a bad one. So spawn 1 and 2 and activate 3 and 4. That is not good. So again, spawn is going to be 3 right now because my biohazard level is low. And then we're going to activate 3 and 4. So 3 is going to move. All right, so we're in that instance where this zombie has to choose which way it's going to go. So we're going to draw a fate number. Again, drawing a fate card and seeing what it says. It says number 2. And so number 2 puts it on this bridge. So it's actually going to move this way. So it's going to go 1 and then 2. And then we're going to have a combat here. But before we get to that point, we're also going to activate track 4 here. Now track 4 has a stack of 7, which means it only moves one area. It's a very slow moving mob of zombies there. So it's stuck right there, which means it didn't get to this one. And I might be able to get to it before it takes damage, but I kind of doubt it. All right, so now that we've activated everything, we're going to do our combats. And so that means that I'm going to end up in close combat with this stack and Ed. And so we're going to roll for Ed. Now, his close combat has him at a 2, so he's going to roll 2 dice, and let's see what he gets. And he gets a shield and half a heart. That's actually pretty good. Now, we check to see the zombie stack to see how much damage it does. We're in a building, so that means each tile is only quarter point of damage. There's 4 tiles there, so that's 1 whole point of damage, but that's blocked by the shield on my dice roll, so nothing happens on both sides. However, as a reminder, anytime that a Murder of Horror stack is involved in close combat, they're going to add a Biohazard cube to the bag, so we add a yellow cube. All right, so that token's done, and we draw a new one here, and it's the purple units again, so they're going to get to activate. And so now I need to decide if I want to do a Crisis Adrenaline move. I don't want to for the purple faction here. We're going to go straight into the action, and I'm going to use Ed again, but this time I'm going to do his Vehicular Movement. See, Ed has the ability to pick up and drop off player civilians during its vehicular movement. And so what I can do is I can only pick up 1 that's allowed with his special ability, but I will have to spend 1 unit of supplies in order to do this because vehicular movement takes supplies, it takes gasoline. And then I can pick up the civilian unit and move it up to 6 spaces away. And so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to drop it here. And I guess I'll stay there, because I'll try and repair this area so I can start evacuating people there. Now, moving out of an area of zombies is fine as long as you started your turn in that area. All right, so now we determine if we want to do a follow action, and I think I will. I will use my crowd control ability with Phil King here. He can move 2 tokens, so we'll move them 1 adjacent connected space away and into this space here. Now, he doesn't move with them, so I will have to move him later. That's going to cause me to draw a fate card to see if we take an event, and yep, sure enough, now we have to draw an event because we used that follow action. So here's our event. It says, check the map for any tracks that do not have at least 1 Murder of Horror stack on them. Mutations are not considered, and if any track does not have a stack on it, immediately spawn a stack in that track's spawn zone. And so all the tracks currently have a stack in them, so I don't have to worry about that. And so for the second follow action, I think I will attack with the tennis players, which means I'm spending 1 supply to attack. And we're going to roll 2 for a ranged attack. Let's see what we get. All right, that was not too bad. We got a critical hit and a shield. That's going to do 3 damage. We get to re-roll the critical hit to see what else we get. Another critical hit. That's 5 damage. 6 damage. Well, we kind of overkilled this stack here. So that stack is gone. That's really good because they were in a predicament there. If that stack had moved, they would take a lot of damage being out in the open right here. Now, it does mean we draw another fate card, and then fate card says we have to draw an event card again. That is not good. All right, so this is a really bad one here. Patient 0, spawn 3 Murder Horror tiles in the Good Samaritan Hospital area, then draw 3 cubes from the Biohazard bag and apply their effects and place those cubes back in the bag. Oh, that is so bad. I told you those things are bad and you don't want event cards. All right, so we spawn a stack right here in the hospital. The hospital's getting crowded. And then we're going to draw 3 cubes from the bag. Let's see what we get. Oh, we lucked out. 3 green cubes. That does nothing. So that was good. All right, so now that we're done with our follow actions, we're going to draw the next token, and it is a fate token. Here we go, drawing a card. Oh, the spawn says Reanimated. Draw a fate number. Okay, we'll draw a fate number here. And it's a 4. And it says add 2 tiles to each Murder of Horrors unit located on that track number equaling the drawn fate number. So on number 4 here, we're adding 2. There's only 1 unit here. So wow, now there's 9 tiles in that spot. That is just not good. And it's heading straight from my compound. And the crazy thing is now we had to activate that track too on top of that. That was just not good at all. So this moves 1 space. It's going to end its movement in a space with a civilian unit, initiating combat, killing the civilian unit, so that gets removed from the game. That'll cause the stack to get 1 more tile, and then we're going to have to add 1 more yellow cube. Again, anytime it's involved in close combat, we add a yellow cube to the bag. Or a red cube if you've run out of yellow cubes. All right, so we're drawing the next token, and the next token is the orange faction, so not too bad. Now for the Crisis Adrenaline move, I will move this token here. We'll move Phil over here, and I think I'll move Sid up a couple places here, because I don't need him in that area anymore, and I'll leave the rest. All right, so we have one action to do, and I think I will use the search action here with Johnny Deere. So we're gonna draw a search card and see what we get. Oh no, this is not good. It says your unit walks down an overgrown garden path. They spot bags of kale, but move on past those as no sensible person would eat that. As they turn to a shady corner, they are suddenly pounced on by mutated hummingbirds and butterflies. What special kind of hell is this place? Immediately spawn 3 murder horror tiles into this area. Oh, that was not good at all. And so they go right here. Wow. Okay, so I have a correction to make earlier. When these spawned here, they had to initiate an immediate close combat effect, which will mean also John Deere is also going to get in close combat attack here. So I have to resolve this real quick. I apologize for that mistake. Now the doctor is going to fight the zombies here. The zombies have a stack of 3, so they're at most going to do 1 damage. The doctor's going to roll 2 dice according to his combat value, and he gets to block that. So that's okay, but we do have to add 1 yellow cube to the bag. And so now we're going to do the combat between Johnny Deere and that stack there. And we're in a building again, so we're looking at 1 damage from the zombies, but we get to roll 3 dice because of Johnny Deere's ability there, his combat ability. And let's see. All right, so once again, we're not taking any damage and we're not doing any damage. So again, sorry about that mistake. If they get spawned into an occupied area, then they're going to immediately initiate a close combat attack. All right, so now the question is if I want to do any follow actions, and I do. And so the follow action I'm going to do is evacuate. Now I don't need a faction unit in that spot. There just happens to be one here with the Coast Guard unit. And so we're going to evacuate these civilians here because this area is not compromised, and we'll evacuate them by the helicopter. And so we evacuated both of these. Now it's worth a total of 3 points, and we'll track that on our evacuation points track. And so that puts me at 3 evacuation points. And again, we need 26 by the end of round 9. All right, so having done a follow action, we have to see if we draw an event card. No event card, so that worked out for me. Now, do I want to do another follow action? I kind of do. I want to get ahead in this game. So I'm going to use Ed here to repair. So we're going to draw a fate number and compare that to the repair value. And so with a 5, I get to repair as much as my admin rating. And so yeah, my admin rating is 4, and so I get to repair those 2. Now this area is no longer compromised. That does mean that I have to draw a fate card to see if we draw an event card for using a follow action. And no, we don't. That really worked out well. All right, so now we draw our final token, and it is the Doom token. You know, it's really odd. I don't think this has ever happened. It's been faction, fate, faction, fate, faction, fate, then faction and Doom. That has never happened before. But there we go. Now the Doom has this draw an event card. This is not good. And here we go. Terror on Overdrive. Place a Horrors +1 move marker in the spawn zone of each track. The next time that track activates, each horror unit adds 1 to its normal movement allowance. If there's already a marker on that track, flip it over to its +2 side and add 2 to every horror movement's allowance. After applying the marker's effect, discard it. All right, and so we add all these markers here to those tracks. Now note that's the entire track, not just the spawn area. So if there's multiple stacks in the track like there is in track 2 here, then both of those would move that extra value during that activation. All right, so that is all our tokens, and now we go on to the end of round. Now, if it was the end of the night, we would be removing any exhausted location markers. If we had any mutations, they would be healing 1 point of damage. But now we have to draw from the bag. And we've put quite a few yellows in here, so let's see what we draw. We draw 2 tokens, and they're both green, so that worked out. So we don't advance the Biohazard track at any at this point. This is really good, because I've had so many games where I start out drawing 2 yellows, and it just puts everything back. It sets me back too much. And then we'll put the tokens back in the bag, and we're going to advance the round marker 1 space, and then we'll move on to the next round. Now at this point here, I'm going to end the video. I really thank you for watching. If you have any questions about the rules or want to point out any rules errors I may have made during this part, let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think of this game. Plum Island Horror, like I said, is now one of my favorite games of all time. I love this game. It's so good. Now, I will be continuing this playthrough. I will leave this set up. I will record an additional play covering all the remaining rounds as long as I survive. We'll see how far that goes. But I'll cover all the remaining rounds, and then I'll try and win the game. We'll see how it goes. But if you want to watch that video, it'll be posted a few days after this one is posted. And I thank you very much for watching me on Tabletop for One. Have a great night.